The glass didn't shatter when I dropped it, just cracked at the base and rolled under the buffet table. No one even noticed. Everyone was too busy laughing at her joke. The one where the punchline was me. I didn't laugh. I didn't even breathe. I just stared at her, my wife, glowing under string lights, telling a room full of well-dressed strangers that I was the reason she couldn't be happy anymore. She didn't say it in those exact words, but it was clear enough. "She's just kidding," someone said, elbowing me. Was she? When the toast ended, they all clapped. For her. Not for us. Not for our marriage, or our anniversary, or anything real. Just for the version of her that performed perfectly in a crowd. The one who told charming stories about her sensitive husband, who overthinks everything and gets upset when she stays out late. I stood there holding a plate I no longer wanted. Chicken sauté. Cold. Like the silence between us on the drive over. She glanced at me only once. That glance, it was brief but sharp. The kind you give a child who's about to cause a scene. I was supposed to smile, nod, shrink. Instead, I walked out the back door. No warning. No shoes. Into the wet grass. Through the hedge. Past the line of parked cars and into the dark. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stand in that room another second while she performed our ruined marriage like it was a comedy sketch. She caught up to me in the driveway. I heard her heels clicking against the asphalt, then silence. Then a voice, soft now, like the scream had never happened. "Come back," she said. "I love you. Don't go. Not like this." I turned around slowly. My face was burning. My palms were shaking. Because she just humiliated me in front of everyone. And now she wanted to pretend it was nothing. That was the moment I realized. She only loved me when I was leaving. I didn't say anything. Not then. Not while she stood behind me in that driveway, mascara smudged just enough to look human again. For a second, I thought maybe this was the turning point, the part where we'd both fall apart in each other's arms and promise to rebuild from the wreckage. But I'd read enough stories, fairy tales, even Reddit posts to know better. This wasn't that moment. This was damage control. She reached out, just barely brushing my sleeve, and whispered again, "Please, Elle, don't make a scene." That hit harder than anything she said inside. Don't make a scene. As if the entire party hadn't just watched her air out my weaknesses like fun facts during trivia night. As if I was the one about to make a spectacle. I turned away, walked to my car, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. I didn't even put the keys in. My reflection in the windshield looked hollow. Older. Weaker. Like I'd been quietly corroding for years, and tonight someone finally turned the lights on. 5 minutes later, the passenger door opened. She got in without asking. Her perfume was heavy, the kind she only wore when she was nervous or had something to confess. She didn't speak at first, just crossed her arms and stared out the window like she didn't know how we got here either. Then she said, "You embarrassed me." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just that. I embarrassed her. I laughed. A dry, stunned laugh that didn't sound like mine. "You called me pathetic in front of 30 people, I said quietly. "You made fun of me while I stood there like some punchline with a name tag. "You were acting weird," she snapped back. Hovering. Looking lost. I didn't know what else to do. "You could have talked to me like a person," I said. "Like a husband. Like someone you supposedly love." She didn't respond. Just stared harder at the glass, her jaw tightening like she was chewing invisible guilt. I couldn't take it. I started the car, and she immediately said, "Where are you going?" "Anywhere that isn't here," I replied. "I just need to breathe." She reached for the key, her voice suddenly frantic. "Albert, please, don't go." I didn't mean to yell. I didn't expect you to look so hurt. I looked at her and said something I never thought I'd say. "That's the problem, Darla. You didn't expect me to feel anything at all." She didn't chase me when I got out of the car again. This time, I left the engine running, walked a few blocks to a bench near a closed florist shop and sat in the dim yellow light of a busted street lamp, hands folded, trying to understand when exactly love turned into something so cruel it could smile while stabbing you in the chest. I checked my phone. No texts. No calls. Just one missed message from earlier, a photo from my sister of our dog wearing a party hat, with the caption, "Happy 8 years, you two weirdos." I closed my eyes and let the ache wash over me. Because the truth was sinking in fast, I wasn't her partner anymore. I was a prop in her perfect picture. And tonight, that picture cracked wide open, right in front of everyone. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. The idea of walking back into that house, hearing her fake sweet voice ask me if I was done sulking, made my stomach twist. Instead, I drove out past the edge of town, where the road curves along the lake and cell signal disappears. I parked in a gravel pull-off and listened to the engine tick in the silence. The sky was overcast, just black on black with no stars. Fitting. I thought about checking into a motel, but even that felt too deliberate, like it would make the situation real in a way I wasn't ready for. So I slept in the car. Or tried to. Mostly I just sat there thinking about how long I'd ignored the signs, about how long she'd stopped choosing me, about how I kept mistaking her contempt for confusion, thinking if I just waited long enough, she'd come back to herself. When morning came, my phone was full of notifications. 3 missed calls from Darla. A few texts, mostly short and emotionally hollow. Can you just let me know where you are? And, you made your point. But then one that stopped me cold. People are asking questions. I need to know what to tell them. That told me everything. She wasn't worried about me, she was worried about optics. About the story her friends would hear. About being seen as the abandoned wife instead of the one who orchestrated the collapse in slow motion. I didn't respond. I drove back into town and sat in the grocery store parking lot again, nursing a gas station coffee and staring blankly at a dumpster. I didn't know what to do. Divorce? Counseling? Pretend it didn't happen? Every option felt like trying to fix a shattered mirror with duct tape. I finally texted her. I'm safe. I'll come by later to get some stuff. She replied instantly. Don't be dramatic. Just come home and talk to me like an adult. I should have expected that. She always made it about my reactions, not her actions. I drove home just after noon. The house was spotless, like nothing had happened. A candle was lit in the kitchen. Music was playing, something acoustic, low volume, the kind she plays when she wants things to feel normal. She met me in the doorway like a hostess greeting a late guest. No hug. No tears. Just that controlled expression she uses when she's already decided how the conversation should go. Hey, she said. You look like hell. I ignored the jab. Walked past her, straight to the bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started packing a few clothes. She followed, arms crossed, tone clipped. So this is your solution? Run away for a night, come back, and just pack up? No, I said, zipping the bag. This is me refusing to stand in a house where I'm the target of your jokes and still expected to play husband. Her mouth opened, ready to fire off some snark, but something in my voice must have stopped her. She looked scared for the first time in years. Not of me, of what my leaving might mean, of what people would say, of losing the version of me that kept holding everything together despite all the quiet cruelties. She sat on the edge of the bed. For once, she didn't have anything clever to say. Just sat there, blinking like someone had turned on a bright light. You're really going, she whispered. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I can't stay here pretending we're okay. I'm not your enemy, Darla. But you've been treating me like a burden, like a fool. And last night? That was the moment something broke. I panicked, she said. You were just standing there looking hurt. I didn't know what to do. I made a joke because it's easier than facing. Facing what? She looked at me, and her voice dropped so low I barely heard her. That I stopped trying a long time ago. And that was the first honest thing she'd said in months. That admission hung in the air like smoke. I stopped trying a long time ago. It came out of her mouth without hesitation, like she'd rehearsed it silently for months and finally found the right pause in the conversation to let it escape. I stood there, frozen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even sigh. I just stood with my hand gripping the strap of my duffel bag, staring at her like she was a stranger who had just confessed to a crime I hadn't realized was being committed under my own roof. She looked up at me like she was waiting for permission to justify it all, and that's when I realized something cruel. She expected me to comfort her after saying that. After gutting me with the truth, she thought I'd sit down beside her, say it's okay, and ask how we could fix it. That's how it had always gone. Her actions hurt, and somehow, I was the one patching the wounds. I sat down across from her, but I didn't touch her. I didn't lean forward. I didn't play the role she'd come to rely on, the quiet man who absorbs the damage and calls it love. I just asked, when exactly did you stop trying? She blinked, caught off guard by the question. I don't know. It wasn't one moment. It just faded. Faded, I repeated, not even angry, just tired. Like a song you used to like, but don't play anymore. That's not fair, she muttered. No, what's not fair is standing in a room full of people and watching the person you married pretend you're something to be embarrassed about. What's not fair is pretending we're fine just because we live in a clean house and share a calendar. She didn't respond. Her eyes darted toward the window like she wanted to escape the conversation, Not because she had somewhere to be, but because she didn't want to look at what we'd become. That used to be me, avoiding the truth, hoping love could be held together by habit. But not today. Today, I wanted the full inventory. Every scratch, every fracture. I asked her the question I had avoided for over a year. Is there someone else? The moment I said it, her whole body stiffened. That single pause said more than words ever could. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't outraged. It was silent guilt, thick and undeniable. Darla, I said again, my voice low and calm, you owe me the truth. She didn't cry. She didn't confess with trembling lips or run out of the room like in a dramatic movie. Instead, she just closed her eyes and whispered, it was once. Just one time. A mistake. I leaned back, pressing my hands against my face. It didn't feel real. I had imagined this possibility 100 times in those late nights when she came home late or smelled like someone else's cologne. But hearing her confirm that she had betrayed the vow she made to me with the same mouth that used to say forever, it felt like the floor dropped from beneath me. With who? I asked. She hesitated again. It doesn't matter. It does to me. Finally, she said it. A name I knew. Someone from her networking events. A guy named Marcus. I had met him, shaken his hand, watched him laugh too long at her jokes. I felt sick. I stood up slowly, my legs heavy. I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I just walked out into the hallway, each step sounding like a countdown to something ending. She followed, of course. Not with urgency, with desperation. Elle, please. It wasn't an affair. It was one stupid night. I didn't even want. I don't care if you wanted it. You still chose it. That's when her tone shifted. Her voice cracked. I was lonely. You stopped noticing me. You always seemed tired or lost in your head. I turned around and looked her straight in the eyes. I was tired because I was carrying both of us. I was lost because I was looking for the version of you that actually loved me. She collapsed onto the stairwell and covered her face. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for not going to comfort her. I had nothing left to give. She used up every drop of my patience, and now she was finally choking on the silence she created. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if I'd file papers or sleep on my brother's couch or come back here in a week out of habit and weakness. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the man she could guilt back into place anymore. She had yelled at me in front of everyone, humiliated me like I was disposable, and only when I walked away did she whisper the words I used to live for. Come back. I love you. But now I knew what they were worth. I didn't leave that day. I wanted to. I really did. But as I stood outside, bag in hand, keys in my palm, I remembered something that made me hesitate. The dog. The ridiculous little rescue mutt we picked up 5 years ago when we were still pretending to be a teen. Winston. He was part terrier, part gremlin, and fully unaware of the emotional decay unfolding around him. He was still inside, probably curled up by the window waiting for me to sit on the couch so he could climb into my lap like he always did on hard days. I went back inside, not for Darla, not for some romantic reconciliation, but for Winston. And maybe, deep down, for the pathetic part of me that still hoped she'd grab my hand and cry the kind of cry that says, I'm sorry, without words. But she didn't. She stayed upstairs while I walked back in. No sound. No apology. Just silence, thick and bitter. Winston wagged his tail when he saw me. I knelt beside him and buried my face in his fur, trying to push down the lump that had been lodged in my throat since she said his name. Marcus. I couldn't stop hearing it on her lips. How many times had she said it? In what tone? Had she whispered it the way she used to whisper mine? I sat on the couch like a guest in my own home, Winston curled up next to me. I didn't know where else to go. My brother lived 2 hours away and worked night shifts. My parents were in Arizona, retired and oblivious. And I wasn't about to crash on a coworker's sofa with a duffel bag full of shame. So I stayed. Just for the night, I told myself. Around 9 p.m., I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I didn't turn to look. She stopped in the doorway and stood there for a moment like she didn't know how to approach me anymore. I didn't sleep with him again, she said quietly. I just want you to know that. I nodded once. I don't care if it was once or 10 times. The damage is the same. She sat in the armchair across from me, curling her legs under her. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Just the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional hum of traffic outside. Then she asked, Do you still love me? I stared at the TV, which wasn't even on, and whispered, That's not the question that matters. The question is whether you ever did. She looked like she'd been slapped. And maybe she needed that. For the first time, she didn't defend herself. She just sat there, absorbing the weight of that question. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. After a long pause, she finally muttered, "I think I love the version of us I had in my head. The idea of being happy with someone who wouldn't hurt me." "And I was the one who hurt you?" I asked, genuinely shocked. "You didn't do anything wrong, Albert," she said. "That was the problem. You were just too steady, too predictable. I felt invisible, even when you were right there." It's incredible how someone can reframe your stability as a flaw. I used to think being the dependable one was a good thing, that love meant choosing someone who wouldn't leave. But to her, my consistency had become suffocating. Not romantic, not strong, just forgettable. I stood up and grabbed the duffel bag again. She followed me this time, all the way to the door. "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I don't know," I said. "But wherever it is, at least I won't be a punchline." And then finally, her eyes filled with tears. Real ones. Not performance. Not manipulation. Just pure, confused grief. "Elle, please. Don't leave like this. I love you. I still do. We can fix this. We can. I'll try. I swear." But that was the thing. The trying should have happened before the betrayal. Before the mockery. Before the party where she looked at me like I was something to escape. "I believed you when it still mattered," I said. "No? I don't believe in us anymore." I opened the door and stepped out into the night, not knowing where I was headed, just certain I couldn't stay another second in a home where I was no longer seen. Behind me, she stood on the porch, barefoot, shivering slightly. I didn't look back. That night, I drove without any direction. It was just me, Winston in the passenger seat, and the dim red glow of the dashboard reflecting off my knuckles as I gripped the steering wheel. I passed exits I didn't recognize, motels with half-lit signs, and towns where nothing seemed to be open except gas stations and silence. I don't know how long I drove, 2 hours, maybe more, but eventually I pulled off into a rest stop somewhere past Birch Hollow, near the state line. It wasn't glamorous. The vending machines were half-stocked and the bathroom lights flickered like a horror movie. But it was empty and quiet. And right then, that was enough. I reclined the driver's seat, gave Winston half a granola bar, and stared up through the cracked sunroof. The clouds had finally cleared. For the first time in what felt like days, I could see stars. You know what's weird? In that quiet parking lot, with truckers dozing in their rigs and no one watching or judging me, I didn't feel completely broken. I felt suspended, like I hadn't hit the ground yet, but I wasn't flying either. I was hovering somewhere in between heartbreak and realization. Between being a husband and being just a guy in a car with a dog and a bag full of clean shirts and dirty emotions. Around 3:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text. It was her. Again. "Did you make it somewhere safe?" It took me 10 minutes to type a reply I didn't delete. "Yeah, I'm okay. Please don't text me again tonight." I stared at the screen, half expecting her to ignore that boundary like she always did. But nothing else came through. Maybe for the first time, she believed me when I said I needed space. The next day, I checked into a cheap roadside inn. No frills. Just beige walls, a hard mattress, and a key that barely worked. But it had Wi-Fi, and I needed to let my boss know I was taking personal time. I sent a vague email and then spent most of the day just lying there, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly like a clock that didn't care what time it was. I couldn't stop replaying the party in my head. Her voice, loud and smug. The way people laughed, not because I was funny, but because she made me the joke. And all the while, that guy Marcus was probably somewhere smiling, completely unaware of how deeply his name had detonated everything I had built. By evening, I'd almost convinced myself to go back, just to talk, just to get closure. But then something stopped me. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail. From a number I didn't recognize. I listened to it with my stomach clenched. It was Marcus. His voice was relaxed, almost amused. "Hey man, not sure if this is the right number, but Darla gave it to me back in February when we were seeing each other. Just wanted to say I didn't mean to cause drama between you two. I had no idea she was married at first. That part was news to me. Anyway, if this is you, my bad, I guess. Peace." I sat there, frozen, phone still pressed to my ear even after the recording ended. February. Not a one-time mistake. Months. She hadn't just lied. She had crafted an entire reality where I didn't exist. Where we didn't exist. She had introduced herself as single, shared stories that excluded me, invited him into something I thought was sacred, and then stood in our home and looked me in the eyes like I was crazy for asking questions. Everything inside me went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes with peace, but the kind that comes right before a storm that will ruin everything in its path. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I just sat there, realizing that I had spent years giving someone every ounce of my loyalty, my softness, my effort, while they were giving strangers the version of themselves I never got to see anymore. I finally understood. I wasn't part of her world. I was her escape plan if the other ones failed. So when I got a knock on my motel door the next night, when I opened it and saw her standing there, hair disheveled, eyes puffy, clutching one of my old hoodies, I didn't say anything. Not right away. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her with one sentence. Was I ever enough, or was I just convenient? Her face collapsed, and for once, she had no script, no joke, no defense. Just silence. The kind that told me everything I needed to know. She didn't answer the question. Not right away. She just stood there in the hallway of the motel, holding onto the sleeves of my hoodie like it was going to protect her from the weight of what she'd done. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. That alone told me more than any words ever could, because for the first time, she wasn't trying to spin it, explain it, or soften it. She had nothing left to say, and maybe that was the most honest she'd ever been with me. Still, she stepped inside when I moved out of the doorway. I didn't invite her in. I just didn't stop her. Winston barked once from the bed, but then curled back into the blanket, like even he was too exhausted to react anymore. She stood near the wall like a guest in someone else's grief, eyes darting over the motel's cheap paintings and yellowed lampshades, searching for anything to focus on except me. I didn't think he'd call you, she finally said, voice low. That's what you're worried about. I replied, that he called me? Not that you were seeing him for months and never said a word. I wasn't seeing him for months, she snapped, suddenly defensive. It was on and off. He knew it wasn't serious. Right, but apparently not unserious enough to not give him my number. I walked past her and sat down on the edge of the bed, resting my elbows on my knees. Why'd you do that? Why'd you give him my number? She hesitated, and then said something that felt like a stab cloaked in honesty. I guess part of me wanted you to know. I couldn't say it myself, but I knew it would come out somehow. And I knew you wouldn't believe me if I said it. You're right, I said. I wouldn't have believed it, because I was still stupid enough to think we were struggling, but not rotting. She leaned against the dresser, arms crossed, eyes shiny but still holding back the tears. You think I wanted any of this? I scoffed. You didn't stop it either. You let it happen. Again and again. Then you stood at that party, laughed at me, mocked me in front of everyone who still thought we had a chance. And then you followed me out the door whispering about love like the sound of it would make me forget the slap in the face. I panicked, she repeated. I didn't know what to say. You were standing there looking so small. I was small, I said, because you made me that way. And the worst part is, I let you. I let your silence become the language of our marriage. I let your coldness become routine. I convinced myself that if I just waited long enough, the version of you I fell in love with would come back. But she didn't. She's gone. And I don't even know if she ever existed. Darla finally stepped forward, and this time the tears came. Not the manipulative kind. These were real. Raw. She reached out and touched my shoulder, and I didn't pull away. I didn't flinch. I just sat there like a statue, absorbing the weight of her remorse like I had absorbed so many of her disappointments. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't even know who I am anymore. I wanted to feel something again, and he made me feel seen. There it was. The truth. Ugly and sharp and soaking in selfishness. I didn't even argue with it, because honestly, I understood that feeling. I had wanted to feel seen too. I had just chosen to wait for her to notice instead of searching for someone else who would. What do you want from me now? I asked, voice flat. I want to fix it, she said immediately, stepping in closer. I want to go to counseling. I want to go back to when things were good. You mean you want to go back to when I didn't know the truth, I said. Because what we had, that wasn't good. It was just hidden. She dropped her hands. So that's it. I shook my head slowly. I don't know what it is anymore. But I know I can't pretend none of this happened. I can't be the man who lets this slide just because you're scared of being alone now. I'm not scared of being alone, she snapped, then immediately softened. I'm scared of losing you. Because you were the one thing in my life that actually made sense. I looked up at her, really looked at her, and I didn't see the woman I married. I saw a woman who had confused comfort with commitment. A woman who was only terrified of the consequences, not regretful of the costs. A woman who had needed to break me in front of others to finally realize I was the only one still standing beside her. I didn't respond. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes. You should go. Her breath caught. Elle? You should go, I repeated. I need space. And you need to sit with the choices you made, alone. She didn't argue this time. She stood there for a moment, maybe hoping I'd change my mind, then finally turned and walked out, closing the door behind her so gently it almost sounded like mercy. But the truth was, there was no mercy left between us. 3 weeks passed before I saw her again. During that time, I rented a small place above a bakery. The floors creaked, the walls were too thin, and the hot water was unpredictable, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to tiptoe around my own life. No more holding my breath. No more wondering who I was coming home to. Just me, Winston, and the quiet hum of a world that kept turning, even when everything inside me had been flipped upside down. I didn't block her number. I didn't write some angry online manifesto or light her things on fire. I didn't need to. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. Not the kind of tired that a nap fixes, but the kind that comes from carrying someone else's indifference for too long. And once I finally let go of it, I realized I could breathe again. Every morning, I'd walk Winston down the street to a small park. We'd sit on a bench, watch the sun come up over the empty swing set, and I'd sip coffee that I'd actually made for myself. No one telling me I forgot the almond milk, or that I was in the way, or that I was too quiet lately. It was peaceful, honest, real. Then, one afternoon, I heard a knock on the bakery stairs. It was her. She wasn't dressed up. No makeup. Just jeans, sneakers, and a gray hoodie I hadn't seen in years. She looked human, small, tired, the way I used to look all the time. "Can I come up?" she asked. I nodded. She stepped inside. No perfume, no performance, just a quiet woman with regret in her posture. "I've been in therapy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've gone to every session, alone, and I've started to understand why I did what I did." I didn't say anything. I let her speak. "That was new for us. I blamed you for everything," she continued. "For my boredom, my bitterness, my emptiness. And you just stood there, trying to hold it all together. I punished you for not being exciting enough when really, I was the one who stopped showing up. I stopped choosing you." She looked around the apartment, small kitchen, second-hand couch, a few plants already half dying from neglect. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," she said. "I just wanted to say thank you for walking away, because it forced me to stop pretending. I've started rebuilding who I am, not as your wife, just as a person, and I'm grateful for that. It took me a while to find my voice." "I'm glad," I said, and I meant it. I didn't think I'd ever be able to forgive you. But now, I don't think about what you did every time I hear your name anymore. That's something. She smiled, not because she was winning, but because she knew she didn't deserve that kindness, and I gave it anyway. We talked for about an hour. She told me about her new job. I told her about the weird neighbor downstairs who plays polka music at 2 a.m. We laughed. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even sentimental. It was two people who had been through something awful and were still standing. When she stood up to leave, she said, "If someday you ever want to talk more, as friends, I'd like that. But I understand if that's not possible." I walked her to the door, gave her a soft, almost unnoticeable nod. "We'll see." And that was it. She walked away without begging. I let her go without bitterness. Now, months later, I'm still here. Still in the apartment. Still waking up early with Winston. Still figuring myself out. But I'm not broken. I'm not bitter. And most importantly, I'm not invisible anymore. Because walking away from someone who doesn't see your worth isn't the end. It's the beginning of seeing it yourself.